Okay, folks, it's time for the chilling video 3 of the Pokemon series. So this one's going to be about team building and also building individual Pokemon for your team. I think it's important to understand there's a difference between building for normal Pokemon, which is a wider spread of normal Pokemon battling, and then there's also building for a draft league where you know what your opponent's team are. I'm going to go over the differences between the two. If you really don't have the time to do that, I guess you can wait to the next video where I'll kind of put a more streamlined explanation of how to pick a draft team. But I would highly recommend watching this one, or at least watch that one and then come back and see if you can sit through this one, because it's really important and you will be at a disadvantage to anybody who's watched this one. And that really sucked, you'd be very embarrassed. But before we get to that, there are a couple things I need to go over that I missed in the last video. So first of all, you can nickname Pokemon. Like, here look, all these Pokemon are nicknamed. And so what that just means is that that's the name that's going to show up when you switch it in. That's not the name of the Pokemon. You have to hover over it in battle, and to the right of it, you'll see the actual name of the Pokemon. I just thought I'd say that really quickly because I saw some people having confusion with that. Now, the next thing is priority moves. I talked about speed in the last video, and here's the thing. Most moves have a priority of 0, right? Which means that they're all going to compete with each other for which one goes first. But there's moves with negative and positive priority. Most are positive priority. And what that means is that those moves aren't going to compete with moves with 0 priority. They're going to compete with each other. So if I use Ice Shard, for example, it's guaranteed to be faster than any other move that isn't part of this +1 priority bracket. So basically just consider different tiers of speed. You won't see these moves very often, but they're important in case like a Pokemon is getting too fast or too strong, you need to shut them down. But in exchange for their priority, it often means they're weaker than other moves or have drawbacks. But those do exist, they're not a huge thing, I just thought like it's worth mentioning. Now the last thing I didn't mention in the other video is team preview. Yes, okay. So I know some of you have been playing random battles to learn how to play, and that's great, like random battles is good because you actually have to build the team yourself. But when you play random battles, you'll see that the other person's 6 Pokemon will have question mark icons like here. It looks sort of like this. All of them will have these Pokeballs, and you won't know what the Pokemon are. But then, if you're playing actual competitive Pokemon, the previews will look more like this. As you can see, you can actually tell what the other Pokemon are when you're there. Well, ignore these. But basically, when you start the game, instead of seeing having one Pokemon sent in instantly, you'll have your selection of 6, and they'll have their selection of 6. And when you start the battle, you'll get to pick which one you want to use. So I'm just going to load up a game real quick, and I'm going to demonstrate how that looks. So you can see here, you can see all 6 of their Pokemon. You can see all 6 of my Pokemon. I can pick whichever one I want to use, so I'm just going to switch that in, and once I'm done with that, we'll continue. Okay, so I won, obviously, so let's continue. Now, we're going to go into team building itself. So, first thing is, each Pokemon will have a different role on your team. It's important to understand when you're picking Pokemon, why do you want it to fulfill that role? So, you've got your defensive Pokemon, you've got your offensive Pokemon, you've got your Pokemon that are a bit of a mix of the two. So let's take, for example, Blissey. Blissey is a rather lopsided Pokemon, as you can see. It's got a lot of HP, it's got a lot of special defense, bad defense, and bad attack. Sounds like really, really bad defense, actually. So if you were to look at this Pokemon, you wouldn't exactly think, I'm going to use physical attacks with it, because its physical attack is garbage. This Pokemon primarily functions as a special wall, and its stats reflect that, its ability reflects that, or it can heals itself when it switches. This Pokemon sits here, does nothing. So if you want a team that consists largely of Pokemon that sit there and do nothing, this Pokemon would fit in perfectly, because it would just be able to defend itself very, very well, and that's a great role to have. Although what's interesting about Blissey is that its special defense is actually so strong already that you really need to invest in defense rather than special defense, because you don't need to do any work with this. It's already really, really good as is. And if you don't invest in defense, it'll crumble. Now, but it gets a little bit more complex than that, because let's say you took a Pokemon like Zapdos, right? And Zapdos looks like it'd be a great offensive Pokemon. And to an extent, it is. It's really, really strong. It has 125 speed, and it gets great offensive moves. But it's used primarily as a defensive Pokemon, where most of its investment is in defense. A little bit in speed, you get something like that. So why is it that this Pokemon uses more defensive stats? Well, to answer that, we have to look at its typing, its moveset. First of all, Zapdos has reliable recovery and roost, which means it's able to heal itself, which means it makes for a naturally good defensive Pokemon. In addition, its special attack is good enough that it can still fire off strong attacks without needing to invest. In addition, as an ability that Pokemon hit it, they might get paralyzed. So all of a sudden you're seeing this Pokemon can end up being a really potent defensive wall. But then on the flip side, let's take a Pokemon like Barraskewda. Barraskewda has 2 unworkable defenses, it has very high attack and speed, it's basically built to be an attacker. You're never going to see a defensive Barraskewda because the thing is always going to crumple. So you can generally look at those stats and see what kind of Pokemon you want it to be. And of course, Zapdos can be offensive as well, but often these super offensive Pokemon you see are going to be defensive. Now, and of course, there's Pokemon that are also going to be a mix of the two. Let's take Heatron, for example. Heatron often runs a highly, especially defensive set. This is the set I run for most of my Heatrons. And so you think, okay, what movesets can it use? Probably something defensive. But you'd be wrong. It uses mainly offensive moves, or at least a couple. It has Magma Storm, Earth Power. You don't really need to know the specific move right now. But as you can see here, 2 of its moves are offensive. Its primary role is actually going to be attacking a lot of the time. So what does this mean? It's sort of a mix of the two, where it comes in to sponge hits, but it's also important. It comes in to sponge hits, but it also plays a really important role on attacking a team. For example, there are teams that need Heatron for its offensive potential as well, especially Magma Storm, which can trap people. So you can see that there's like kind of a balance you have to strike between the two. Now I'm going to go into building an individual Pokemon. So in general, so this is going to mean using the EV slider. So EVs are kind of complicated if you really explain how the game works. The best way to understand them is just they're free points you can allocate to a stat that just make it stronger. And the maximum you can allocate to one is 252. And you really want to invest these EVs wisely because you want to put them in the stats you want to improve the most. For example, Barraskewda wants to be as fast and as strong as possible. It has no interest in being bulky, so there's no reason to invest your EVs in defense. In addition, there's also something called Natures. Natures will increase one stat by 10% and decrease another one by 10%. Every single Pokemon should have a Nature, because there's never a stat you don't want to sacrifice. There's always something you want to improve. Usually, for an offensive Pokemon like this, it's going to be the attacking stat you don't use. For example, Barraskewda would use a plus attack nature and a minus special attack nature, because it doesn't need the special attack and it wants to invest its attack as hard as possible. So, let's take this Barraskewda for example. It's 379 attack. If you hadn't done any EV work on that attack, it would only be 282. That means you increase the attack by almost a factor of what, like 30% just by using these EVs. So you can see how potent these a tool you are. You can't forget about these. Now on the other hand, and it's going to be similar for defensive Pokemon. As I said, for Blissey is going to use max HP, max defense because you want to get this to as high enough stats as possible. So, this is a special case, so special defense is already very high. And you want to lower its attack because it's not using its attack. Same thing with Zapdos. Increase HP, increase defense, and then lower attack because you're not using it. So you can see that it preserves its special defense, special attack, and speed, which are all marginally important. Essentially, this is the sacrificial stat. And so for most Pokemon, it's going to be exactly like that. It's going to be pretty intuitive. You slide up what you want and you pick a stat to sacrifice. However, there are certain exceptions. You're only going to see this in a couple cases. There are certain Pokemon that appreciate having both attacks that are both offensive and there are Pokemon that appreciate having attacks that are both special and physical. For these Pokemon, you have to be a little bit more creative. For example, on the Garchomp set I use, which are Pokemon that use special attacks and physical attacks, I like to sacrifice defense because I feel it's less useful than special defense. And then I leave the attack as is because the attack is already strong enough. I want to boost its special attacks from being like really bad to mediocre as much as possible. This is mostly for the surprise factor. I don't know if you're ever really going to see this or if it's relevant to you, but I thought it was important mentioning in case you want to have some sort of strategy that makes use of both special attack and attack, or for example, defense and special defense. Now we're going to talk about building a Pokemon specifically and changing the EV, because if you notice, I've cranked everything up mostly at 252, 252, and 4, which is the base setup because that you can maximize 2 stats and add 4 to another. However, there's certain Pokemon, actually a lot, that will very much appreciate having specific stat spreads. So this applies to both normal Pokemon and draft Pokemon. Now we're going to be talking about building a Pokemon specifically for a certain situation. And as you've probably noticed, I've cranked the sliders up on most of these Pokemon to 250, 200, 252, and 4 every single time, which is the base setup. You can max up 2 stats, add 1 extra point to another stat, and that's about it. But there's certain Pokemon that really appreciate having certain spreads, and this applies for both draft and normal Pokemon. Let's take an example in a vacuum. Kartana is fighting a Garchomp, right? And so you'll be able to tell this just from messing around yourself, but the maximum speed a Garchomp can attain, which is always going to be 252 plus, excluding a choice guard, is 333, right? And let's see about Kartana. The maximum speed a Kartana can attain is 348. And you know these two Pokemon are going to be facing off, and your only goal as Kartana is to outspeed just this Garchomp. So what you're going to do is, what that means is that some of this speed investment is wasted. you're only going to want to use as much investment as to just outspeed Garchomp. You want to EV specifically for that goal. If you know Garchomp is hitting 333 speed, the only necessary speed you need is 334. This allows you, This allows you to invest everything into attack and then also add some HP for extra bulk. So you can see that by being clever about how you EV things, you can be conservative. Of course, this is only a vacuum situation. Kartana and Guard, usually you want maximum speed on Kartana, but this is really important for Draft League, because in Draft League, you know that there are only 11 Pokemon, and if you know this Pokemon, this is the fastest Pokemon out of all 11 of them, you're only going to need 334 speed, because if they've got a Choice Scarf, you're outspeeding them anyway. They're outspeeding you anyway, sorry. So it's important to use your EVs cleverly. The other thing is specific defensive calculations. So this one is going to be really if this one, again, you don't have to know how to use the damage calc. This is like more complex stuff, and I'll put a timestamp to skip this. But if you want to use it for like specific things, it's really important. So if you want to use damage calc, first thing you're going to do is search up damage calc online. This will instantly come up. And now there's a super overwhelming menu, but most of this you can ignore, to be honest. I'll try and make it as intuitive as possible. So first thing you want to do is, let's say you got a Kartana, right? And you know this Garchomp has Earthquake, and you know it's probably going to be its maximum attack, or you're going to assume it's at about maximum attack just to be safe. And you want this Kartana to take, let's say, less than 50% from this Earthquake. So what you're first going to do is you're going to, one sec, my monitor turned off. Alright. The first thing you're going to want to do is search up Garchomp on one side of the damage calculator, and you do this by typing into this bar here, which will by default be set to 2 random Pokemon, but you just type it in here, and you'll get a list of default sets. If you want, you can use one of these. I'm just going to use the default set, because this already has the maximum attack, the general set a normal Garchomp will use. And then we're going to put Kartana in it. So when you put your Pokemon in, you're going to put blank set. This is going to leave it with just the base stats, no nature, no ability, no item, but it'll work fine for our purposes. So as you can see here, by default, a 252 attack Garchomp on a 0 HP, 0 defense Kartana will do 50 to 59% with its Earthquake. And the reason this is a range is because the calculation in this game works by I think a 20% fluctuation, so you can never be entirely confident how much damage something can do, but you know the range it's going to do. I think I showed this earlier with Zapdos and Tapu Lele. So now to calculate how much defense you're going to need to protect yourself from this Earthquake, what I do usually is I just start cranking up the HP by EV value by EV value. And as you can see, as I do this, the Earthquake starts to do less and less damage. You're starting to see everything is starting to do less. Or if you really want to be specific, you can crank up just defense, which will give you slightly higher returns. But then I think crank up HP is usually better, because then you're ignoring special defense. I think Kartana is a special case because it has no special defense. So I'm just going to crank defense straight up. As you can see, the Earthquake damage is slowly starting to go down as I invest more and more. So if I keep going, eventually you're going to see that when I invested right around 228 EVs, then you know that this Earthquake is never going to kill you in 2 hits. So I wanted to engineer my Kartana specifically to live 2 Earthquakes. That's how I do it. And I invest the remainder into speed, a little bit into attack, and yeah, then there you're done building. So the damage calculator, it looks really complicated, but it's important but if you're able to make some educated assumptions about your opponent's team, you can really build your Pokemon to catch them by surprise. And the same thing applies. If I wanted this Kartana, let's say this Kartana is carrying some move I want to do a lot of damage to. So let's say I've got Leaf Blade. I want this Leaf Blade to do guaranteed more than 50%. So now I know I'd have to invest at least 92 attack into Adamant Nature. Or let's say I want to do at least 55%. I know I'd have to invest, at least 88 EVs into Leaf Blade, into attack to guarantee this Leaf Blade killing it in 2 hits. So that's how you use the calculator. You can also use it in the middle of a battle. For example, if you've got your Kartana in again, and you know your set, you can make assumptions about the Garchomp, and if you didn't use this information before, you can find out how much damage this is going to do just by typing in any random Pokemon. You can see now, and you can get a list of moves, and you can see if we were to use that move, how much damage it's probably going to do. It's a really useful tool that people often overlook because it's kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest. But if you're willing to use it in a battle, especially since you have plenty of time, there's 5 minutes per turn in the battle. I don't recommend taking that long, but if you really need it, it's there. The timer counts down, but Yeah, it's there. So you've plenty of time to do this, and it's pretty simple. So it can really help you make assumption of whether you need to like switch out or stay in. So that's all for the damage calculator, and now we're going to be picking a moveset. So the small one here is another really, really useful resource because they're going to tell you, I've mentioned this already, but if you just search up, for example, Kartana small gun, you get the whole shebang of like all the moves you're probably going to want to use. You get multiple different sets, each one with like brief explanations of what they're going to do. I'm also going to include, for at least the first few tiers, explanations of what each Pokemon do and like their sample movesets. I'm going to type them out, and you can just control F the document at your leisure. But beyond that, like, this is a good resource. The other thing you want to do is look at the Pokemon itself. So for example, Kartana is a grass and steel Pokemon. This means predominantly you're going to want to have at least one grass type move, at least one steel type move, because those are its stats, which means each of these moves is going to do extra damage. Of course, again, as I showed with Dragon Pole in the last video, there are exceptions to this. But in general, you're going to want to have some combination of stat, and you're going to want to have either a setup move, like Swords Dance for example, which Kartana often uses, which raises attack. This enables it to attack better. So you can consider this like a utility move. There's other utility moves that exist. For example, if you wanted to heal, you can use Synthesis. So sometimes there's some filler slot here, or in the case often, it just uses 2 coverage moves. And what coverage moves are moves that aren't the same type as the Pokemon, but are built to hit Pokemon that it otherwise cannot hit with these 2 moves. For example, Leaf Blade and Smart Strike. Let's say Kartana wants to hit Heatran, right? Leaf Blade and Smart Strike are both resisted by Heatran. It's a Fire Steel type. So what can Kartana do if it thinks if it wants to prepare for the eventuality of a Heatran coming? It would use a Fighting type move, right? Because Steel is weak to Fighting. So you can see here Kartana gets access to Sacred Sword, which is one of the most common moves on it, because it's able to bust through threats like Heatran. Then, for example, what if Kartana needs something neutral to hit, let's say Corviknight, which doesn't take a lot of damage from Sacred Sword, Leaf Blade, or Smart Strike. You can use Knockout, which is another move. So there, now you can see you've built a 4-move moveset out of general Pokemon Kartana expects to see, so it has a way to build around them and counter them. And that's for general Pokemon. For draft, you can be a little bit more specific. For example, if I'm using a Kartana and I know Corviknight, Blissey, and Clefable are coming, I need to know what moves I can use specifically. So I know I'd want to have Smart Strike because super effective against Clefable. I know I'd want Sacred Sword because super effective against Blissey. I know I want Knockout because the best move for Corviknight. Then you probably don't really need Leaf Blade. You can just pick something else random to use. So for draft, you can get a little bit more specific because you know exactly what the movesets of the other Pokemon are. And when I show like building a sample draft in the next video, then you're going to see a little bit more what that looks like. So that's really it for picking a moveset. You also want, as long as you're picking moves that synergize with each other or moves that you know are going to hit Pokemon that are coming, they should complement each other to a degree. Like for example, I wouldn't want 4 grass type moves because that's redundant. I wouldn't want a grass and a bug type move because most grass type moves already hit what bug types do. So that's what's most important to understand for building an individual Pokemon's moveset. I think one other thing I want to highlight is also how you build for a defensive Pokemon. So let's say there's a couple important hallmarks. So like Corviknight, for example, is a Pokemon that gets reliable recovery, so you're gonna want to give it a roost. You can check for these. You can check for whether these Pokemon get reliable recovery on Smogon. You can see in their movesets, but the general moves you're going to see are Roost, Recover, and Soft Boil. Those are the 3 most common. You're going to give an item that heals up a little bit, like Leftovers, and this Pokemon is using mainly more utility moves. You're not going to see 5 attack moves, because Corviknight's main goal is to defend. So you're going to have 1 attack move, maybe like Brave Bird, which just uses its flying coverage. You're going to have Roost, which is the healing move. You're going to have U-Turn, which is a move used to switch out and gain momentum. And then you're going to have Default, which is a support move. So you can see this Pokemon takes more of a supportive role. It doesn't need the attacks because it's primarily defensive. So you don't need to worry specifically about, you definitely wouldn't worry about like coverage moves for Corviknight. You either use Brave Bird or Body Press. Those are the 2, like either 1 fighting move or 1 flying move, because each one serves different purposes. It depends on your thing. But you're almost never, unless using it for a very, very specific scenario, going to see an offensive Corviknight. So the team building process for that is a little bit different, but I think these assumptions are largely the same. And real quick, I'm just going to explain the concept of momentum, as I said about U-turn. Basically, if someone attacks you and then you U-turn afterwards, you've now had the opportunity to switch out and you know exactly what's coming. Switching in this game happens before anything else. When you switch out, it's always the first thing to happen in a turn. But when you switch out last, you can make your switch based on assumptions you've already seen. If you switch first, the Pokemon that comes in is in danger. But if you U-turn, this Pokemon can safely tank for like the next Pokemon that come in, which could be frail. So for example, if I want my Regieleki, right, it's got very bad defense. And I know that a Pokemon with a really strong Earthquake like Landorus is coming. So, instead of switching directly to Regieleki, which would get me killed, I wait for the Landorus to attack me, and then I use U-turn, I can safely get my Regieleki in, and it doesn't take any damage. I hope I've explained that, but I can't really go over this in depth right now. It's a pretty, deep topic. It's just something I thought would be important to mention. Now, I think I've explained everything for individual Pokemon, so we're going to go on to building a full team. And to start with that, I'm going to go with the general team building process, which you're going to be using if you're not in a draft league, since I think that's also very important. A lot of topics there are really, really important. And to demonstrate this, I'm actually going to be doing this with a team I built yesterday and tested. So this team did get me to top 500 again. I haven't landed in a pretty long time. So either I'm just really good or the team works. I think it's a general, pretty decent explanation of the process. Okay, so let's take a look at this team, right? I started with a Pokemon I want to build around, and when you're building a team, that's the most important thing to figure out. There are probably better Pokemon than Gengar. I was thinking, hey, today I want to use Gengar. So you take this Pokemon and you want to build around it. You form this entire team around either Gengar or a Pokemon with Gengar and a Pokemon is paired with. For me, it was just Gengar. I just want to use the Pokemon. So I thought, what is the best way to support it? What is the best way to pick Pokemon that complement it? So the first thing I did was I thought, okay, Gengar is physically weak, and I need a physically defensive Pokemon and a specially defensive Pokemon. The ones I picked for the job are Ferrothorn and Heatran. So you can see a couple cores forming here as well. I think it's important to explain the topic of cores. Cores are basically certain groups of Pokemon that accomplish a role. They're offensive cores and defensive cores. By the way, core spelled the way Helena said it, C-O-R-E. So the two columns you can see here, there's Dragon, Fairy, Steel, and Fire, Water, Grass. These are two cores you can see here. There's a Dragon type, there's a Fairy type, and there's a Steel type. And this core is good because if you think about it, I'm not going to explain all their weakness and resistance right now, but they complement each other's weaknesses and resistance as well. So these cores often make up strong Pokemon to go together. At the same time, Gengar and Garchomp form a strong offensive core because the Pokemon that Gengar can't break, like Blissey for example, Garchomp has no trouble with. And the Pokemon that Garchomp often has trouble with, Gengar can wear them down. So these two make a good offensive pairing together. So that's what I mean by picking synergistic offensive and defensive Pokemon. You'll see lists of them, but you have to think. For example, Gengar doesn't do well with special attacks, weak to Blissey, there are certain ghost types it can't deal with. What does Garchomp do? Garchomp gets rid of them. Gengar probably would have probably have some troubles getting rid of Heatran or Ferrothorn, for example. Garchomp can threaten those out as well. In addition, you have other Pokemon that support those. Garchomp and Gengar, there are certain holes that they can't cover. That's what all these Pokemon are here for. Heatran, for example, can get rid of some Pokemon like Toxapex, which can often give trouble to these two. So this is more broad. I'm really just explaining this for the sake of understanding this when you build your draft. But you have to look at the Pokemon, you have to look at the types, you have to look at the rules, and you have to say, what would complement this? What is this missing? So in this case, this Gengar is in this case, I need a default Pokemon that can also offer knockoff support. I need a Pokemon that can hit with a flying type move. I need a Pokemon that can gain momentum. I need a Pokemon, and Regenerate is a move that an ability that allows Tornadus to heal itself. So I thought Tornadus is a perfect candidate for this team. And then I thought, okay, I need another physically offensive Pokemon. I need to add Garchomp. Plus, Garchomp and Tornadus are important because Tornadus is a flying type, which is 100% necessary. You almost always need a flying type on a team to be protected from ground type moves, which are super, super strong. Same thing, you need a ground type Pokemon on your team to protect from electric type moves, which are also super strong. So these two made up important roles on the team. And then I thought, hey, these Pokemon aren't so physically defensive. What if I run into another strong Earthquake? I need Ferrothorn for this. So I use Ferrothorn. And then I thought, I need something fast. I need something that can offer utility by tricking a Choice Scarf. And I need something that offers a Fairy type move. I need water coverage. So I thought, okay, Tapu Fini is perfect for this job. Finally, I thought, I need a Pokemon that can trap things. I need a Pokemon that's specially defensive. I thought, okay, Heatran has to come here. Plus, Heatran finishes the Fire, Water, Grass core. As you can see here, if someone uses an electric type move, which these two are both weak to, I can use Garchomp, I can use Heatran to sponge it, or I can use Ferrothorn. If somebody uses a ground type move, I can go into my Tornadus, I can go into my Ferrothorn. But what I want to emphasize is the team building process is not perfect. For example, this is not the final iteration of the team. I realize this team has a flaw. This team's Scarfer was really, really bad. When I tested the team out, Tapu Fini wasn't doing anything, so I switched to Urshifu, which I thought might be stronger. It's also water resist and it offers stronger moves that are also physical. I thought it was overcompensating with special attacks. In addition, I realized that my Pokemon was not very physically. I realized that my team was not very physically bulky, since I cut out the Ferrothorn for a Weavile. So I had to add Corviknight here instead. Then I thought this Urshifu isn't doing well, so in the end I ended up replacing it with the Rillaboom. So that's how I got to the final iteration of the team, and this is the one that worked best for me. So you can see there's also kind of testing process when you're building a normal team. And now you're not going to have time to do this in draft unless you like want to build a mock team for the opponent, which doesn't make sense. As you can see here, there's kind of like, you can follow my general thought process of how I built the team. So just to illustrate on this final one, let's say I started with Gengar, right? I'm going to go through it step by step. I had this Gengar. I think I need something that's strong physics. Alright, I have Corviknight. Now I need something Sponge Electric types. Garchomp. Garchomp also offers offensive utility. This Pokemon is both offensively useful and defensively useful. Then I think Ghost type moves mess me up. First of all, I'm going to add Heatran as a specially defensive counter. I'm going to have it use Stealth Rocks. Since I lost my Stealth Rocks, I'm going to have it use Stealth Rocks. And then I have the Corviknight as a defaulter. So I've got those two roles cleared. I have Pokemon that has knockoff. Then I have Weavile. Weavile is also an emergency Ghost type check. It beats Ghost types because it's a Dark type. This also gets knocked off, so I have support there. And then finally I'm thinking, I need a Gloomon to hold these together. So for this, that would be Rillaboom. Rillaboom offers Grass type support, which is an important move to have. It completes, there's no Fire, Water, Grass core here anymore. I kind of ate my words there, but the Grass type support is important for a lot of current Pokemon that you're fighting, like at least in. Okay, so I realize I've kind of ate my words here with the cores because I dismantled them, but like there's actually no fairy types left on this team, but I needed this Rillaboom on the team, and that's important. Cores are a general guideline, but if there's a certain need for the Pokemon you need, you can feel free to twist them around, I guess. In my case, I found I was weak to water types. I found I needed something that could beat rain teams, so that's why I added Rillaboom to this team. And it worked for me, but it's not always going to work for you. But as you can see, you kind of saw my general process. Originally, I started with these cores. I started with Pokemon I thought would be good defensively, and then I switched them up. And I want to emphasize that if you want a better explanation of cores, you can always go, there's like Smallgun has great guides on them. I am not the best at explaining team building. It's kind of a complicated process. I've also never really liked team building, but yeah, that's the general gist of it. And now, okay, so I think I'm gonna save the team building Whoa, my piano music hasn't been playing this entire video. Sorry, gang. Maybe I'll add it in the background really quietly. Anyway, I think I'm gonna explain team building in a draft league for the next video, but I thought the core thing was important to understand because when you draft, you're going to want to be drafting basically like you're building a team. Like you're thinking, if I was building a team and I had a couple extra slots, what would be like the roles I want to fill? So you're going to want to have cores, you're going to want to have like Pokemon that work well with each other offensively and defensively. So if you understand this, it makes it a lot easier to understand the draft. So I think the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to post the general guidelines of what every Pokemon does, and then using that, I'm going to explain how to build a draft team. Once I'm done with that, I mean, you can always ask me questions, but then you have no excuse to not know what we're doing. So I think the draft will start like a week after that. So that's what's coming up. Anyway, thank you for sitting through this if you did. I know the team building part was pretty choppy, like this entire thing was kind of messy. I built this team, yes, the reason this video took so long is because I was building this team and testing it. I wanted to make sure it was like good to illustrate what I was talking about. But I think you at least generally see the idea of what I was trying to do. A lot of this team building, like, a lot of this is intuition, where if you played it for a while or you know what you're fighting, you know what you want to switch up. Like, I critically thought about this. I thought, this is what's the Pokemon that's missing. I kept changing around until I thought I had something I was satisfied with. So that's really, the testing process is important, but I'll try and show in the next video how the testing process, oh sorry, I paused the recording. I'll try and show in the next video how that testing process is changed for a draft league. Yeah, that's the end of the rambling at the end of this video.